Good evening. I'm Sue Ellen Brazil. I'm the GFWC president-elect, and on behalf of our international president, Deb Stranowski, who is in Nashville this evening, I am excited to welcome you to our third in the series of Power Up webinars. You are in for a treat tonight. We have a tremendous speaker. The first two have been terrific. We thank you for joining us. And so, Juliet, let's get started.
We are ready. And Darrell will bring up our slides. We're so happy you are here with us tonight, President-elect Sue Ellen Brazil. And I hope all of our sisters in Nashville are having a wonderful time. As Sue Ellen said, this is our third session of a 6-part series called The Power of You, a GFWC advocacy training series. The session tonight is focused on legislation and leadership. We're going to highlight our successes and give you our priorities for 2023. I'm Juliet Casper, and I am serving as the chair of the GFWC Legislation and Public Policy Committee, and I live in Little River, South Carolina, and represent the Southern region. Each GFWC region has a representative. And tonight we have 2 representatives of the committee with us. We have Kathy Huggins from Mississippi Valley and Debbie Fiore from New England region. You might take a picture of this slide so that you'll have our contact information should you need it later. Kathy and Debbie are going to describe our recent GFWC legislative successes. Also with us tonight, we have Debbie Bryant. Debbie Bryant is the president of Unified Solutions, LLC, and our GFWC legislative public policy consultant. She will be introduced in more detail later when she discusses the proposed GFWC legislative priorities for 2023, the first session of the 118th Congress. And please feel free to comment in the chat where you are from and the name of your club. We do plan to answer questions at the end of each session. Please post your questions on the Q&A board rather than the chat. This seminar series is also interactive, so there will be some poll questions that we will want you to answer. Participating in the polls allows you to help shape our committee's efforts and focus. All 6 sessions of the series will be recorded and available for viewing by GFWC members via our website. Please watch news and notes for more information. As attendees tonight, you will receive an email next week from Zoom with a link to watch tonight's recording. So let's get started with our first poll question. Did you attend either of the first 2 sessions? A, I attended the Power of You, Elements of Advocating. B, I attended the Power of You, LAC is for me. C, I attended both webinars. Or D, I did not attend, but I plan to watch the recorded versions. Please make your choice now so we can see the results and move on with the program.
We're at about 86%, so keep those votes coming in.
All right, a few more seconds, get your vote in. All right, now we're time for the results. First, at 16%, I attended the Power of You, Elements of Advocating. 17% attended the Power of You, LAC is for me. Oh, I like this. 41% said I attended both webinars. And 27% of you said you were not able to attend the first 2, but plan to watch the recorded versions. Fantastic. That's exactly what we want to see. And we're so glad that you are here tonight. Together, we advocate for those in need is the theme of that our committee has adopted for this administration. The GFWC members have advocated for several bills over the past 2 years. And committee members Kathy and Debbie are now going to share with you the GFWC advocacy success stories in Congress over the last 2 years. Take it away, Kathy.
Thanks, Juliet. So after last week's fabulous presentation by Jarrell Jones, GFWC Programs Manager, I'm hoping many of you are members of the Legislative Action Center and are receiving the weekly GFWC news and notes. As a member of the LAC, you receive legislative alerts and take action on those alerts. By reading the weekly GFWC news and notes, you have the most up-to-date Capitol Hill and White House information within the Legislative Corner article that appears at least once a month, usually every 4th week. Our committee also distributes a quarterly newsletter to state presidents, directors of junior clubs, and state legislative chairmen. These committee newsletters are typically on a specific issue or issues and offer more in-depth information. The 2020-2022 newsletters are on the GFWC website and include Women Elected in 2020, and an advocate's personal story for a survivor's Bill of Rights, the Equal Rights Amendment and GFWC's important history of advocacy, federal appropriations, responses to natural disasters and refugee resettlement, congressional redistricting, and GFWC support for domestic and sexual violence awareness and prevention legislation. The newsletter for this administration has discussed the elections, resources for finding state-specific data on domestic violence, human trafficking, and awards entries. These materials can be found on the GFWC website, and we will be adding more documents to the legislative toolkit found in the member portal. So time for another poll question. Where can you find resources for legislative advocacy? Your choices are the GFWC website, the GFWC Legislative Action Center, the GFWC member portal, or all of the above. Please make your choice now.
We're at 80%.
Awesome.
Coming.
Okay. So let's see those results. So GFWC website has just 1% responding. The GFWC Legislative Action Center, 6%, 0% for the member portal, but of course, a whopping 93% for all of the above, because absolutely you can find resources in all 3 of those places for legislative advocacy. All righty, so now I'll ask our committee co-person, Debbie Fiore, to share our recent legislative successes.
Thank you, Kathy. Reviewing the Legislative Action Center activities for 2020-2022, a major success was certainly the passage of the Violence Against Women Act in March of 2022, after Senate leaders negotiated a bipartisan bill built upon the version approved by the House of Representatives in March of 2021. As you can see, the legislative process can take a long time, and continuing to participate in the GFWC Legislative Action Center makes a big difference. In addition to individual club women contacted their elected officials throughout the legislative process, GFWC and 39 state federations signed a letter of support for the Senate bill in collaboration with the National Task Force to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. Our role was so critically important that then GFWC International President Miriam St. Clair was invited to join national women's organizations, tribal leaders, law enforcement, members of Congress, and administration officials at the White House to celebrate the passage of the Violence Against Women's Act. Other GFWC advocacy efforts included passage in August 2020 of the Great American Outdoors Act, which provides mandatory funding for state and local parks and recreation. In July 2021, Club Women supported a bill to change the formula for the Victims of Crime Act, Crime Victims Fund, to increase deposits and restore critical funding for grants to states and local programs that assist victims of crime. Congress approved the Puppies Assisted Wounded Service Members for Veterans Therapy Act in August 2021. The fiscal year 2022 National Defense Authorization Act took sexual assault, domestic violence, and child abuse outside the chain of command, and most recently, the fiscal year 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, approved in December, guaranteed that sexual harassment cases will be taken outside the chain of command. GFWC also supported a bill allowing domestic violence survivors to withdraw up to $10,000 penalty-free from their retirement plans for a year, with up to 3 years to replace those funds. This pension reform proposal was made law as part of the omnibus appropriations bill approved in December. In support of annual appropriations, GFWC co-signed multiple letters and activated the Legislative Action Center to increase funding for programs addressing intimate partner violence, child abuse, teen dating violence, campus sexual assault, and elder abuse. GFWC also joined Shot at Life to increase funding for global childhood immunizations. In 2022, GFWC joined a coalition led by the National Center on Sexual Exploitation and supported our new affiliate, Hope for Justice, by supporting 2 bills enacted by Congress to address human trafficking: the Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Reauthorization Act and the Abolish Human Trafficking Reauthorization Act. GFWC joined the March of Dimes to advocate for the passage of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. This bipartisan maternal health bill guaranteed pregnant workers have access to reasonable workplace accommodations and aren't forced to choose between a healthy pregnancy and a paycheck. Congress approved this bill in December 2022.
So as you can see, GFWC was extremely active in the last Congress, which ended in December. Bills that we supported became laws, and those laws are bringing about positive changes in our communities. This is your power as a member of the GFWC Legislative Action Center. Time for another poll question. In your opinion, which GFWC community service program needs our advocacy attention in 2023? Your choices are arts and culture, civic engagement, education, environment, and health and wellness. And on this one, you can mark more than one answer if you choose.
We're at 60%. Keep those answers coming in.
Okay. It's kind of hard to choose on this one, isn't it?
When there's so many good choices.
Mm.
All right, we'll close out.
Okay. All right, so 23% responded with arts and culture, 55% responded civic engagement, another 55% responded education and libraries, 49% responded with environment, and our top vote getter was 67% for health and wellness. So thanks so much for your input on that. Of course, one benefit of you attending this webinar is that you get to share your opinion and we get to hear it to help us set our priorities. So speaking of priorities, where will our advocacy efforts take us in 2023? We've got Debbie Bryant, GFWC Legislation and Public Policy Consultant, here to share with us those legislative priorities. She works closely with the GFWC Executive Committee, the GFWC Resolutions Committee, of course, our Legislation and Public Policy Committee, and the Signature Program Domestic and Sexual Violence Awareness and Prevention Committee, and the Junior Special Program Advocates for Children. Debbie.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight. And thank you to the GFWC Executive Committee, and especially the Legislation and Public Policy Committee for hosting this webinar series. Anthropologist Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Her famous early research found that children learn by watching adult behavior. That was certainly me. I attended my first state legislative hearing on the Equal Rights Amendment in the mid-70s when my mother, Juanita Bryant, testified before the North Carolina General Assembly in support of the ERA and on behalf of the North Carolina Federation of Women's Clubs. She later served as international president from 1982 to 1984. And that is when I moved to Washington to be one of her aides. And upon leaving office, she returned to North Carolina, and I stayed in Washington and continued my career in federal government relations. So I grew up believing in club work at the local, district, state, region, national, and international levels of GFWC. Being active in public policy and civic engagement helps recruit members, retain members, and develop leaders for the organization. And I think many of our current leaders and individual club women find great purpose in advocating for others by contacting your local elected officials, your state legislators, and your members of Congress. Many club women find purpose in serving in public service, either in elected or appointed positions, as a teacher, a healthcare worker, or a first responder. And I believe that in GFWC, with our dynamic resolutions, together we advocate for those in need. So as we begin 2023, I have the responsibility to recommend federal legislative priorities to the GFWC Executive Committee. I turn to the GFWC resolutions and focus on the special programs and the CSPs. And I match those initiatives with the goals of the White House and congressional leadership. Our efforts must be bipartisan. And I must admit that in this political climate, that is the biggest challenge. Our legislative priorities will evolve throughout the year as President Biden lays out his agenda in the State of the Union next week and submits his budget to Congress in March. And as members of Congress introduce bills and congressional hearings are held. We also work closely with like-minded organizations. For example, consider our signature programs, domestic and sexual violence awareness and prevention, and advocates for children. In these areas, I have worked with our affiliate, Hope for Justice, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, the National Task Force to End Sexual and Domestic Violence, which is the umbrella group for all of the domestic violence and sexual assault organizations, Futures Without Violence, and the YWCA USA. These organizations want GFWC club women involved in their efforts. We are an important part of the team. Most often, they have the policy expertise, but we have the numbers, the grassroots. But that works only when our club women belong to the Legislative Action Center and participate in our calls for action by contacting your members of Congress. This is the value of advocacy in GFWC. and response numbers are important if we're going to be successful in enacting legislation. None of these groups have political action committees, but they have the policy expertise, and GFWC brings grassroots to the table. Here are just a few of our priorities, but certainly not a complete list. The Violence Against Women Act was reauthorized in March 2022, and the Omnibus Appropriations Bill approved in December provided historically high levels of funding for these programs. Now there is pressure to cut spending across the federal budget. So we will work with the National Task Force to End Sexual and Domestic Violence to support federal funding this year. The Family Violence Prevention and Services Act reauthorizes funding for domestic violence shelters, state coalitions, and hotlines, and many more programs. We worked on this bill last year, and it passed the House, but it was not approved in the final days of the session. We need to work again with the domestic violence groups and get this bill enacted so that these programs can be reauthorized. The Child Abuse Prevention Treatment Reauthorization Act authorizes programs and provides grants to states and local governments to strengthen community resources to families to prevent child abuse and neglect. This bill was not approved at the end of session, although everyone tried. Still, Congress did approve the Maternal and Child Home Visiting Reauthorization Act as part of the Omnibus Appropriations Bill. Many programs affecting children received increased funding in the Omnibus Appropriations Bill. I usually follow the lead of Prevent Child Abuse America as they identify the priorities for 2023. Online safety. There are a couple of bills that GFWC supported last year that are being readied for reintroduction this year. The Earn It Act removes the liability protections enjoyed by tech companies if they allow the posting of sexual exploitation materials. A case is pending before the Supreme Court, and Congress is waiting to determine the next steps. The Kids Online Safety Act is being revised and will be reintroduced. On these bills, we work closely with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, which hosts weekly coalition legislative Zoom calls. It's been 100 years since the Equal Rights Amendment was initially proposed to be added to the United States Constitution. Hopefully this year, the deadline will be removed, clearing any remaining barriers, and the United States Archivist will certify the ratification of the ERA. GFWC has been a member of the ERA coalition for more than 50 years. And just this week, the House and Senate resolutions have been introduced, so we will be getting out a legislative alert to try to build support for those efforts. Pay equity, regardless of the high-profile actions that were taken by the United States women's soccer team's demand for equal pay, Congress failed to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act. Advocates will certainly try again. Such legislation prohibits wage discrimination based on sex. It makes it unlawful to require an employee to sign a contract or a waiver prohibiting the employee from talking about their salary, which is, of course, the way you find out that whether or not you're making the same as your coworker. Arts, museums, and libraries. The National Endowment for the Arts receives annual appropriations which enhance state and local programs that transform communities into resilient places. If you're not familiar with these programs, contact your state arts council. They would make great speakers for state conventions. I hope we can become more familiar with the NEA and the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities to see if there are other opportunities for collaboration. Annual appropriations are provided for the Institute of the Museum and Library Services, strengthening community resources. These are your local libraries. This is the federal account in which they receive funding. And of course, there are various STEAM programs funded throughout the federal budget. That stands for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. We have resolutions on these issues, And of course, GFWC is known for its support of libraries. And I know GFWC would like to rekindle its relationship with the Librarian of Congress. You may wonder about the Farm Bill, but it's time to reauthorize the Farm Bill, which contains major land and water conservation programs and most of all of the food security and nutrition programs. According to the resolutions, these are important to GFWC. Global vaccinations. Annual appropriations are provided for global childhood immunizations and efforts to improve global disease detection systems. As you know, funding for immunizations is central to the mission of our affiliate, Shot at Life. Be sure to attend the webinar on February 9th to hear more from them. These are several of our priorities, and I'm sure others will emerge as we are in the early weeks of the 118th Congress. This is a picture of the newly elected members of the House of Representatives. I also will keep in mind the results of the polls conducted throughout our webinar series. By participating in these webinars, you are having an input. If we want advocacy to be effective, we must have high numbers of GFWC club women participating in the Legislative Action Center. If you want GFWC to be relevant in Washington, we must have high numbers of GFWC club women participating in the Legislative Action Center. If you want GFWC leaders to be engaged in Washington, to be invited to the White House and to Capitol Hill, we must have high numbers of GFWC club women participating in the Legislative Action Center. I'll close with my favorite quote from one of my favorite governors, Ann Richards from Texas, who said, "If you aren't at the table, you're on the menu." Women have worked so hard to have a seat at the table. Let me give you the best example. Congress operates on a seniority model, and that has always favored men. Well, this year, women have seniority, making a difference on the powerful Appropriations Committee. We now have 4 women. Representative Kay Granger from Texas is the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, and Representative Rosa DeLaura from Connecticut is the ranking Democratic member. Senator Patty Murray from Washington State is the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, and Senator Susan Collins from Maine is the ranking Republican member. When the top 4 meet to make the final decisions, they are called the Four Corners. For the first time, 4 women will have the most important seats at the table, making decisions on more than $7 trillion in federal spending. We, GFWC, must make the best of it now.
Be interested in supporting the bill, what should you do? A, ensure that the bill is compatible with the GFWC resolution. B, contact your regional representative on the Legislation and Public Policy Committee. Or C, both A and B. So please make a choice, and we'll announce the results here shortly.
We're 80% there.
Oh, great. Everybody tonight has been so fast with the responses, and we really appreciate that because it keeps the program rolling along. So let's see what you chose. All right, 3% of you said A, ensure the bill is compatible with the GFWC resolution. 2% said B, contact your regional representative on Legislative Public Policy Committee. And 94% of you got it exactly right. We'd like you to do both. And remember, you can find the GFWC resolutions on the website and in the member portal. Now we got one more poll question before we end tonight. Again, we really appreciate your participation because it helps us shape the focus of our efforts on the committee. How often are you willing to contact your member of Congress about an issue important to GFWC as part of the Legislative Action Center? Every 2 weeks, once a month, once a quarter, whenever necessary, or last choice depends on the issue. Just make one choice, please.
%85% and 90. Okay.
All right, well, I think everybody's voted then. Darrell, let's see the results. Okay, 2% of you said every 2 weeks, 9% said once a month, 1% said once a quarter, 74% of you said whenever necessary, and 14% said depends upon the issue. Thank you so much for participating in this poll. And I'm so happy that you are able and willing to participate when necessary. Sometimes, we have no control over when the bills come to the floor. And as Debbie said, we need to take action immediately to get the support or to oppose a bill. So thank you. So now for the questions. I saw in the chat people were asking about, and you'll see on your screen our contact information again for the committee. And I think Kathy may come on as well to help with questions. I tried to answer some on the question and answer board already. So let me tell you the ones we've already answered. We had a question about viewing the past webinars. And if you registered for the first two, you would have received an email from Zoom with a link so that you could go back and watch the recording. If this is the first one that you have registered for, you will get that email next week and you can re-watch this session. But in order to see the first two sessions, you're going to have to wait till the end because we're going to record all 6 and then make all of those available to members. We also had a question asking if there were any legislative priorities to address the extreme homelessness that's across the nation right now. And we do have GFWC resolutions on point, and we can advocate for such bills provided that they have bipartisan support. So our committee, along with Debbie Bryant, our consultant, will keep an eye out for bills that would address homelessness. And I really appreciate those questions. And the ones we have not answered yet, we have a question about the percentage of GFWC total membership that's registered with LAC right now. I don't have those numbers. We talked a little bit about the numbers last week with Darrell. I don't think Darrell's going to have those up-to-date numbers for you now. Sadly, we have a huge membership, but we do still have a small percentage that is in LAC. It is growing. And of course, we would love all of your help to get your members signed up. You could do that at a club meeting. Just bring a laptop and you can easily sign up, or you can have them sign up with on their telephone at a meeting. A member asked, can the juniorettes join the Legislative Action Center? Yes, I don't know that there's any prohibition against them. Darrell, is there any concern about juniorettes being able to join Legislative Action Center?
Oh, there shouldn't be any concern about that. They can certainly contact their members of Congress.
Yeah, I don't think they can sign up just like any other member. We have a question about what is GFWC's position on Roe versus Wade. Kathleen, that's one that unfortunately right now is an issue that does not have any kind of bipartisan support one way or the other. It's one of those very controversial things. I'm not familiar with what the support may have been in the 70s, and at this time it's not an issue we can address because there is no bipartisan bill or action that's taken place.
Juliet, I might just add that any action that would be taken would certainly have to be in alignment with the stands that we take through our GFWC resolutions. Those are the official stands that we take. And yes, you're right, that is something that's not specifically addressed, but if the person who asked the question might want to know anything specific, I would suggest that she might refer to the resolutions to see what components might have some relationship to potential action.
That's great, Sue Ellen. Thank you for clarifying and adding that extra information. We don't do anything in the Legislative Action Center without having it tied to a resolution. And then, as Debbie said, we don't support bills unless we have both Republican and Democrat support, because we are nonpartisan. And so keep that in mind. Let's see, another question was the future of education. Teachers are leaving in droves. Okay, I think that's just a comment, and certainly if we see anything in the area of education, we'll be on the lookout if there's anything to support teachers. Many of our clubs do that on their own and on the local level, but I'm not aware of any bills right now. Would you consider, another question was, would you consider having a quarterly Zoom meeting on legislation and public policy? This would be an added bonus for those of us on those committees in our clubs. Yes, we would love to do that. This is the first Zoom and Zoom webinar series that we've done. So we would love to follow up and continue this with regular meetings on legislation. Let's see. I'm trying to do the questions fast so that we're not on here too long. We had another question about, looks like legislation brought forward this week by a particular representative that supports prohibiting assault weapons. And with a comment that I hope this is coming up in our LAC as our national resolution support it.
Mhm.
Debbie Bryan, I don't know if you're familiar with what this legislation may be.
I don't know that particular bill, but there are certainly, there will be several bills introduced as the mass shootings continue. And the assault weapon ban was not included in the bipartisan legislation that was passed last year. So there will be ample opportunity throughout the year for us to activate the LAC on this issue. And yes, we do have good, strong policy within the GFWC resolutions that have been adopted over the past couple of conventions. And so we're monitoring those closely.
All right, there's a question that might be more for Darrell. It's someone who did register for the first session but did not get the email with the recording link. Whether they need to wait then to the end of all the sessions to get it, or whether there would be an ability to resend it.
You can, I would encourage you to double check in your email to make sure that you didn't get it. Look in your email for Zoom, because it should have sent an email to all who registered. So you should have that invite, but if you do not, you can email me directly after this session, and we can work on getting you the link to that Zoom.
Thanks, Darrell. We have another question about supplying the list of priorities and maybe the successes. So Debbie Fiore went over our successes, and many of those were listed in our news and notes at the end of end of 2022 and then the beginning of this year. But we can certainly send those successes to each of the members of the Legislation Public Policy Committee can send it to the state presidents and directors of junior clubs in their region to then push it out to the members. As far as the priorities that Debbie Bryant went over, we actually have our legislative priorities listed on the website. So right now you'll see the priorities for last year, and you got the preview by being on this session of what they are for this first part of 2023. So there will be a document that is entitled Legislative Priorities that you can find on the website, and you don't have to go into the member portal for it. It's on the legislation and public policy page. And of course, that's also a document that we would be sharing as committee members with the state presidents and the directors of junior clubs. Well, I think that is all of our questions for tonight.
Juliet,
Yeah.
there's
there
one
more?
other question over in the chat.
Oh, good, Kathy.
So the member is asking if we are working on any legislation on the Hello Girls switchboard operators who were never recognized from World War I. That's a new one on me. Maybe Debbie Bryant, do you know anything about that one?
I don't, but I also know that we do not have a resolution on that. Now, we've got a resolution on Rosie the Riveter Museum, I believe that's out in California, but we do not have a resolution on this. So please check your resolutions, and there is a process to bring something forward, but that is the way that needs to be handled first.
Great, thank you, Debbie. I would like to thank everybody that joined us tonight, and especially our speakers. Kathy Huggins from Mississippi Valley, Debbie Fiore from New England region, and of course, Debbie Bryant, our legislative and public policy consultant. We also have to give great thanks to those in the background, Darrell, who ran everything technology, along with Jolie, who created many of these wonderful slides that you saw tonight. And we really appreciate Jolie Frankfurter and Darrell Jones for their help. And it's wonderful to have President-elect Sue Ellen Brazil with us tonight. And if all the speakers and our presenters can turn on their camera so everybody can see you, and we can tell everybody how wonderful it is to have so many people join us on this webinar. And I hope that you will now sign up for the next 3, because we're not done yet. All right. The next 3 are going to be really exciting, because we are asking our affiliate organizations to tell us their legislative priorities. What do they want us to help them support or oppose in Congress? So please sign up. Please share with your club members. If you enjoyed it tonight, encourage them to also sign up. And remember, if you missed out on any sessions, or if members missed out on any sessions, all of them are being recorded and will be shared with members at the conclusion of all 6 webinars. And just one more little plug. I hope you'll all come to our workshop in Louisville, where we're going to continue the power of you with the power of us and focus on club advocacy. So, Madam President-elect Sue Ellen, would you like to say anything before we say goodbye to all these lovely people?
Absolutely. I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I agree, Juliet. This has been a fantastic evening. Debbie Bryant, thank you so much for the number, just so many bits and pieces of information and suggestions on how we can work to increase our advocacy effectiveness, and to Kathy and Debbie for providing information. It's great, but most importantly, it wouldn't be what it is without all of you joining us. So thank you for registering and being part of the Power Up webinar series. We hope that you'll join us for the remaining 3 seminars. There's lots to learn, Juliet, and obviously it appears that they're enjoying it too. So thank you for being here. Thank you for all the panelists, and thank you for the team that helped to make this possible. We look forward to seeing you next week.